Good morning. Thank you all. It's 10 o'clock and we'll get started. Thank you all for attending the training today that's being presented by our excellent WIT O'Brien's team. And today they're going to be discussing in session 2 eligible activities. Thank you once again all for joining in. And please feel free to put any questions you have in the chat. We should have some time after the presentation for questions. So I'm going to hand it over to Matt for his presentation.
Well, hey, good morning, everybody, and good afternoon, depending where you are. So like Hal said, this is going to be session number 2 on eligible activities. It's kind of a follow-on from what Chelsea had presented last week, which is how to access these funding opportunities in these grant programs. So today, I'm going to break down kind of eligible projects, eligible activities per program. And like Hal said, if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat, and we'll address those the best we can towards the end of the presentation. And also, as I go through some of these project types, I might ask for some hands to be raised to take some kind of general feeling of the group, the audience, about what types of projects they have in mind or they have completed in the past or are looking to complete in the future. All right, my name is Matt Arsenault, Hazard Mitigation Specialist with here at WIT O'Brien's. I've been with them over about a year, a little over a year, maybe a year and a half, actually. Before that, I worked for the state of Colorado as the Deputy State Hazard Mitigation Officer, as well as the acting or the temporary State Hazard Mitigation Officer. With me, I've got Chelsea Morganti and Aaron O'Brien. So the three of us are on this team. They are also in this call as well. In terms of what I'm going to kind of discuss today, eligible categories and activities, the types of projects. We have regular types of projects. And in that, I'm going to kind of highlight a couple, or I'm going to go through all of them, but I'm going to highlight more specifically like phase projects. And then also some 5% projects, which are only eligible under HMGP, which is a Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, and also Hazard Mitigation Grant Program post-fire. Excuse me while I take a sip. I'll also be going over capability and capacity building activities. And under that kind of umbrella of project types, I'm going to kind of go into project scoping a little more detail. I'm also going to go into the difference between disaster and non-disaster activities. So what is eligible under one grant program might not be technically eligible under another grant program. So I'm going to hit on that. I'm also going to hit on subrecipient management costs. And then also follow up with that with the next steps about what you should be planning for and preparing for the next steps. All right, so the FEMA Hazard Mitigation Assistance Program and Policy Guide, it was the updated version of this guide was released this year, July of 2024. Which is good because the last update was not until 2015. So there's been a lot of changes to that guidance. I'll have a link at the end of the presentation where you can access that documentation or that document, excuse me. One of the huge changes is from 2015 to 2024 is there's been this phased not a phase, but they really got rid of the pre-disaster mitigation program, which was an annual program, and it replaced it with the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities grant. So that was one of the major changes that happened in this policy guide change. It covers, like I said, Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, which is a post event. It covers the two annual programs, which is the building resilient structured communities, and the flood mitigation assistance. So this one guide kind of it encompasses, it's like the umbrella encompassing all the grant programs that apply under the hazard mitigation assistance. Like I said, there's pretty much three project types. There's that capability and capacity building, which is technically non-construction types of activities. You got the projects, the hazard mitigation projects, which are more of the groundbreaking. You're doing physical work, like actually breaking ground, and we'll get into those project types. And then the third type of projects is the management cost, which I'll hit towards the end of this presentation. All right, so I'm going to go into first the construction projects, the groundbreaking projects. Those are listed on the screen. That's property acquisitions, some mitigation reconstruction, stabilization, wildfire mitigation projects, warning systems. So this is just a snapshot of the eligible construction projects. And then I'm going to kind of break down each of these project types with maybe like one or maybe like 2 to 3 sentences to kind of give you more of an explanation of what I mean by, say, stabilization. And excuse me if I take sips of coffee and water because my throat does get dry when I'm speaking. All right, so the first one is property acquisition, structure demolition, or relocation. And that's where a community purchases a property, has to be from a voluntary seller. Say this project or this property owner has like significant flood damage and it's repetitive, that maybe they're in the floodplain. A community or a community could request that a state, purchase a property or multiple properties to get them out of that hazard prone area. It's usually done in bulk. It doesn't have to be like when I say bulk, like multiple properties. It doesn't have to be. It could be just one homeowner approaching the county or the state, looking for their property to be purchased so they could stop having this flooding event keep happening, causing damage, insurance claims, stuff like that. So once the state purchases the property, it's going to be maintained in open space. So after that property is cleared, another homeowner can't come and build on that site. It's open space. There are some structures that can be built on that, and I won't go too far into the weeds, but like I said, I'll always refer back to the guidance if you have any additional questions. Show of hands, does anybody want to, or not want to, I'm sorry, but have they expressed interest, maybe from the local communities of wanting to have their property purchased? Trying to get my screen so I can see everybody. Okay. Oops. All right. So mitigation reconstruction, that's another type of eligible mitigation project. It's where a property is either, been partially or totally destroyed. They want to maybe reconstruct it on it to be elevated. They're part of hold on, let me retract my mind here. So mitigation reconstruction, if like say a property has been damaged, they don't want it to be acquired. They still want to live there, or it could be a non-residential. It's just this type of project type is just helps to protect a flood-prone structure. Okay, next type of project is structure elevation. these types of projects tend to be hard to get a benefit cost analysis on, strictly because you're taking an entire home and you're elevating it. It could be up to 10 to 12 feet. These types of projects happen typically around like coastlines, like hurricane prevention type of mitigation activity. Not saying that it has to be, but more than likely it's the ones that we've seen, or at least my personal experience has been, coastline structure elevation projects to protect against those hurricanes, those surge waters that come in, storm surges, um, stuff like that. So that's structure elevation. Stabilization projects are pretty common. They're just preventing slope failure. So that could be, by a stream or a river. You're just trying to stabilize the slope to make sure that it's not going to keep falling and keep, eroding, I guess to say. This could also happen like as a post-fire soil stabilization project where there's been a wildfire. The slope is unstable because of the debris that got burned. The ground that got burned no longer can hold water, so it becomes like a flash flooding event. So those types of things can also happen. Like I said, they can range from shorelines to stream banks to hillsides, mountainsides. Anybody raise your hand if you are thinking about any type of structure elevation or any type of stabilization project, whether it be, some type of, for stream bed or, wildfire stabilization. Anybody thinking about any of those? Correct. All right, now we're getting into some flood risk reduction projects. These types of projects, they want to reduce flooding, the frequency or the depth of the floodwater. They could be localized or non-localized. And what I mean by localized, that's more of like on a smaller scale, like, installing culverts, increasing culvert size. Maybe that there's flooding on this street. And then you kind of do this investigative analysis, and maybe the culvert size that are currently there are older. They need to be upsized to deal with the flow of these weather events. So that's what I mean by kind of like the localized flood risk reduction measures. Excuse me. Non-localized, it's kind of like on a bigger scale. Maybe you want to rehabilitate a dam. Maybe you want to do a stream restoration project. Those are more on a larger scale. Flood proofing. These are still kind of flood mitigation projects, but on a smaller scale, like on a property type, maybe. You want to do some dry flood proofing measures to make the building or the residential structure watertight, right? You want to maybe put in some type of barriers that can be either manually or electronically employed prior to an event or as an event is occurring. Those are type of flood proofing kind of examples. All right. Excuse me. Safe room projects. Those are more like protection from like tornadoes and hurricanes. We see a lot on hurricane safe rooms, tornado safe rooms, if they're in that kind of area where they get a lot of tornadoes and there's a lot of need for maybe community size safe room projects. I'm not really familiar with tornadoes in Nevada, but if you have those areas and you know, if you guys in the plains that maybe see some types of tornadoes, that might be a good area to do like a community size safe room. Retrofits. That's where like identifying and implementing change to existing structures, you know, that are exposed to either flooding, you know, earthquakes, erosions, wildfires. They're used to kind of strengthen the skeletal systems of a facility or a building. So think of it that way as structuring or I guess strengthening. That's the word. The you know the walls, the wood, you know, just making it more structurally sound. That's what they mean by kind of retrofit. So you could apply for a retrofit project, you know, to help with against flooding, erosion, like I said, high winds, earthquake, wildfires, or any other types of hazards. All right. Next one, warning systems. These are again relatively newer and more kind of outlined in the guidance since this new update. You're pretty much just warning people of impending hazards, impending risks. I've seen some in Colorado, especially for tornado warning sirens to alert the public of an incoming storm. But there's also wildfire earthquake warning systems. And there could also be some type of weather stations or rain gauges that kind of collect that data that informs decision makers to respond or react or, you know, track how much water is coming in, like for, say from a storm, how much that impact the river, like the river's flow, how much water it's getting to the river or adding to the river. Aquifer recharge, storage and recovery. That's typically used in like a drought mitigation project. You just want to take the water that's coming in from the storm, right? And you want to just collect it so it doesn't keep flooding, right? And just collect it into like maybe a basin or some type of storage to hold that water and, you know, to use it later on. You know, impacts of drought, obviously. All right, so I went through a couple. I mean, I went through like several of the projects, but I really wanted to highlight two specific projects that we've gotten feedback from the state that could be a priority for them, especially with, you know, new incoming administration, you know, taking into effect some wildfires that have recently happened in the state. So I kind of wanted to highlight a little bit more on wildfire mitigation projects. So the key here, there's a lot of different types of wildfire projects, right? You could have defensible space where that's like a homeowner, you know, wants to participate in defensible space program or they want to apply for defensible space. And that's where you're kind of creating that barrier, that protection barrier from like an individual property owner to the wildland urban interface or the, you know, the WUI. So they're trying to maybe, you know, take some measures to like thin out the forest that's close to their home. Okay. So they want to keep that defensible space. There's also ignition resistant building materials or ignition resistant infrastructure. What I mean by infrastructure is like maybe replacing old wood power poles with some type of fire resistant piers or pilings to put these new power systems on there. Um, that's what I mean by the infrastructure. There's fuel reduction, vegetation management. So that's kind of like when you see they have plenty of maps out there. Like you look at a home and then it's got like defensible space out to like, so many feet. And then once you get beyond that, that's when you want to do a larger scale fuels reduction project, like actually going into the woods, marking trees maybe that are dead or, they're just too clumped together. You just you're thinning the forest. So you're thinning the canopy, you're thinning how the fire behavior is going to react when it comes into contact with those vegetation. So for some post wildfire activities, soil stabilization, seeding. So if say there was a wildfire that just went through a certain area, eligible project could be is just to beef up that area and kind of revegetate it with some native seeds to get to get it back to forest health, right? There's also drainage and debris traps. Those are like say you got a pretty good sized slope of where the fire went through. Like I mentioned before, the soil has been damaged. It can no longer water can no longer adequately drain into that damaged soil. So they have some type of projects that are to help with that, right? To divert so you don't get this flooding after a fire event. And there are, excuse me, and like I mentioned in the previous slide, there are some warning systems that are available under wildfire mitigation specific. Another one that was big on the state's priority is secondary power source. We're talking about how do we keep our facility, how do we keep our community up and running? And I mean, community, I'm talking about critical services, right? Not just getting individual that wants to apply for a generator for their house, right? I'm talking about critical functions, critical facilities. For example, fire stations, police stations, your 911 dispatch centers, hospitals, water and wastewater. Just think of those types of community services that if there was a power outage for whatever reason, how could the community still survive without those basic functions of a hospital, of water and wastewater, of first responders getting notified to come and rescue people after a flood. So think of those types of things when I'm talking about secondary power source. It's not tied to an individual homeowner. It's more tied to those critical facilities and critical functions that a community needs to survive, not just day to day, but especially after an event hits. All right, so I went through all of those projects. Hopefully I didn't go too fast. I wanted to keep it like real high level, throw out some examples for you guys. And then I highlighted those two that are pretty or a priority for the state is that wildfire mitigation projects and that backup power. So now that I kind of wanted to go through what a phase project means. And a phase project is eligible under HMA, so the Hazard Mitigation Assistance umbrella of grants. So it is eligible under flood mitigation assistance, building resilient infrastructure in communities, and has both the hazard mitigation grant program and the hazard mitigation grant program post fire. So when this kind of like bridges the gap, right? Think of it that way. If say you have a project in mind, okay, you have it in mind and that's it. Well, then maybe you would apply for a project scoping grant, which I'll get into under the C and CB. But so you have an idea, but nothing in paper. That you would use to maybe apply for project scoping to scope out the project. And on the other spectrum, you have a construction ready project where you know exactly what you want to do. You have done all the engineering, all the the H&H studies that might be required for your project. You're pretty much ready to go. So phase project kind of bridges that gap. It's right in the middle where you're beyond just an idea, but you're not ready to execute and break ground and do the actual work. So you would use a phase project. You would apply for it in two phases. First phase would be you've done preliminary engineering, you've done preliminary cost estimate, benefit cost analysis. You know what you want to do. You've done some type of research, some type of study. Maybe you're still in the design process. Maybe you're like only 30, 40, maybe even 60% design. So you have done some work, but you just need some extra push, right? Maybe you just need some extra time to get it ready. So you apply for the project in full. You present FEMA with what you have so far in terms of design, what your intent is, preliminary benefit cost analysis. You have that stuff. FEMA reviews it, and along with your scope of work and schedule, it says how you're going to execute the remainder of the design to get it up to 100%, to get everything squared away, ready to be awarded the construction portion. So you'd apply for it in two phases. You'd apply for it entirely, but then you would break it down into two separate phases. Phase one would be to iron out the design, finalize the BCA, do any environmental studies that may be required depending on the size of the project. You would submit your phase one deliverables, it's what it's called, to FEMA. FEMA would review it, ask any questions that they might have, and if FEMA signs off and says yes, phase one is good, you've met all these requirements, we have no further questions. FEMA will then approve and award phase two of the project, which is the execution phase. So just think of it as like a flood mitigation project. Maybe you have some type of level of design. Like I said, you want to increase culverts. You want to, work on a stormwater management, a large infrastructure project. But you're just not ready to pull the trigger and put the shovel in the ground yet. This would be a good approach. So this is kind of like the graphic that I pulled from the HMA policy and program guide. So like I said, it starts with you submit the entire project as its entirety. But within the scope of work, it's broken down into tasks that will complete it during phase one. And then tasks that will be completed for phase two. And it just goes along. So FEMA will look at it. They'll be like, okay, you've got a good body of documentation, studies. It's eligible. It appears to be cost effective based on the preliminary BCA. FEMA would go next to the phase one approval. They'll give you portion of the funding to execute phase one task or deliverables. Like I said, finalizing BCA, finalizing any engineering designs, any EHP concerns need to be addressed during phase one. And then you submit the phase one deliverables to FEMA, and they look it over. They have their EHP team review everything, make sure your designs are good, make sure everything is still eligible and cost effective. And that's when FEMA will award phase two for construction. So like I said, this is a really good approach that bridges the gap from an idea to being 100% ready to go. As soon as the money drops, we're breaking ground. It kind of bridges that gaps, and it gives communities that little extra, not only extra, time to fully iron out all the details, but it's a good approach to bridge that gap. All right. So these are these 5% projects are HMGP only. So before I kind of go into what's on the left, just kind of look at the graphic on the right. So for HMGP, that's it was covered in the last session. That's a post-disaster, like a post-event. Has to be at least for HMGP regular, it has to be presidentially declared disaster. So think of this pie chart that it's how FEMA allocates or has some type of set aside out of the 100% of the money that they're giving a community or a state to manage that disaster, post disaster. So think of it as just 100%. They say that at least 58% should go to regular projects, which are what we talked about previously, going through the regular projects, right? But there's also they say 7% of the 100% should go to planning related activities. And typically those are like your local hazard mitigation plans, updates, or new plans, right? So they allocate 7%. And when I say 100%, every disaster is different. Every fund, as much funding as FEMA will provide is based on the damages from each event. So when I say 100% as a whole, it'll depend, depending on the size of the disaster. Obviously, a hurricane incident, say on the East Coast, will have a higher probably amount of money tied to that compared to maybe a wildfire project in your state, right? They're just too different. But the way that they want to break down how the funding is used per disaster remains the same here. So 7% for planning, and then they have advanced assistance, some 5% codes and standards. Those for like codes and standard activities. But the 5% initiative is where it's allocated if you really can't collect the data necessary to do like a benefit cost analysis. So that would be maybe the rain gauges is a perfect one. How you really can't do a good cost effectiveness review on a rain gauge or a remote weather station, or warning sirens. You really can't quantify those benefits the best way you can. So they set aside this little sliver of the 100%, 5%, where applicants, sub-applicants can use unproven hazard mitigation techniques, technologies, methods, products, which is like the warning signs, remote weather stations, and also generators might fall under this 5% initiative if you don't have enough data for generators to have enough data to accurately account for outages, loss of service. So there are that type of project under the 5% as well. And another one is good too, is public awareness and education about hazard mitigation. That is eligible under 5%. Maybe you want to apply for 5% so you could do some training seminars or put together some hazard mitigation brochures to hand out to schools or to hand out to anybody in the community. That's a good option here too. Okay. All right. So that concludes the regular kind of project bucket that I wanted to talk about. Now we're going to go into the capability and capacity building, which is kind of lumped all of the activities that are not construction or groundbreaking activities. So this is, like I said, new hazard mitigation plans or plans updates. Those are in the guidance. They're so all these are under the CNCV, but they are further broken down in the guidance. So when I say, like, for the first one, new hazard mitigation plans or plans updates, um, that's available under BRIC, it's available under FMA, and it's available under HMGP, the post event, but that is also called a 7% project under HMGP only. So it kind of gets a little bit confusion, but it's eligible under all the programs. They just might call it something different per the grant program. Planning related activities, again, that's another eligible under all three programs, but under HMGP, it falls under that 7% funding cap. I guess that's the way I should have put it better. They fall under that 7% funding cap, only on HMGP. Okay. You also have advanced assistance, project scoping. Like I said earlier on, if you just have an idea in your head, or maybe you have an idea for a project on a napkin, so you know what you want to do, you know where the damages are taking place, you have some idea of what you want to do, you could apply for project scoping to scope out the body of the scope of work, the schedule, the cost effectiveness, the budget, all those things for project scoping. If you want to apply for assistance to help it further along, right? To go from idea to on paper to implementation. Technical assistance, that can be financial or non-financial. Those are only eligible under BRIC and the flood mitigation, so FMA. And I'll go into that. I have a visual that kind of puts all of these programs, and we go through by project to see what is eligible versus what is not by program. Partnerships is good. Creating partnerships, building partnerships. That's key to getting these mitigation projects off the ground. It's very hard to apply for a project all by yourself, right? You might be just a grant writer, but you don't have that engineering background to kind of help out. So those partnerships are key. And then codes and standards, which I briefly talked about under HMGP. They do allow up to 5% for HMGP only. So I kind of probably jumped ahead when I talked about project scoping. So on the right, you'll see the graphic. Like, community identifies a need. Our street has been flooded. I've had to, do so many miles of detour just to get to work, because every time there's a rain event, my street floods. It's a major thoroughway. The whole community, maybe a whole community or a whole neighborhood, has to, do alternate routes, right? So there's a need for the action. And then you develop alternatives. All right. So what could we do? What's the key issue here? Is it a drainage issue? Is it a stormwater management issue? Do we need to increase culverts? The size of culverts, from maybe a 36-inch to like a 42 or even greater diameter culvert. That's when you start developing these alternatives or activities. And then once you have a list of like alternatives, you would see which one is the best alternative. Is it to increase culverts? Is it to go a different route? Do we go directly to the source of the issue? Maybe it's a stream bank stabilization project that could happen way upstream that would affect the flooding in those streets, right? So you're going to look at these alternatives in this bucket of how do we fix the problem, and then you're going to pick, maybe the best one or two, because FEMA likes to know that you've at least done research on some type of alternative to your selected activity. So you're going to scope out a couple of these, and then you're going to pick the best one, and that's how that's your end result, right? So you do this project scoping, you go through all this process, and like I said, with partnerships and teams, is you want to like get the right people together so that you could, scope out the best end solution, right? So after project scoping, after it's complete, you just present this to FEMA, and then it's pretty much done. You have the plan. The next part is how do you apply for funding? Well, you could apply for after you do a project scoping project and you have everything you need. What's great is now you could apply for the construction part. So it's really not a phase project, but you apply for funding for the scoping only, and then you could once that's done, then you could apply for the construction of the project, implementation of the project. Um, and I know that there for brick and FMA, there's like criteria and there's scoring and there's points awarded per say maybe green infrastructure or whatnot. But for brick and FMA, they do give extra points if this project that you're applying for was developed with FEMA funding from a previous project scoping grant. So that's good news there. So some eligible activities under project scoping, engineering design, um, meetings, outreach, coordination with communities to like identify projects, evaluating facilities, collecting data like EHP we talked about, the benefit cost analysis, H&H studies, um, coordinating with property owners of sustainably damaged properties. So like maybe you have a flood mitigation project. But then you have, as you're talking to homeowners, maybe they're wanting to get their properties purchased. So then it goes into flood mitigation project, but it goes that acquisition type route, right? You have a whole bunch of community members that, or a neighborhood that's lumped together, and they all want to just get out of their residences because they flood all the time. So, stuff like that. And then also to add on to that is just scoping alternatives, with the community members or property owners. I'm sorry. All right. So I've talked about regular projects. I've talked about the CNCB capacity, capability, capacity building. I've highlighted a couple key areas under both those project types. And now I'm just going to kind of run through this visual to show you what is and is not eligible per program. So going through, starting with the CNCB, creation of a new plan or plan updates. That's the hazard mitigation plan, local or multi-jurisdictional. That's eligible across all programs. Planning related activities, also eligible across all programs. Advanced assistance, those are only eligible under HMGP and not under BRIC and FMA. And then vice versa, project scoping, not eligible under HMGP or HMGP post fire, but eligible under BRIC and FMA. And the guidance really explains all of this because advanced assistance and project scoping are almost similar, just different in their own special ways. Financial technical assistance is only eligible under FMA, whereas direct non-financial technical assistance is only available under BRIC. Whereas moving down the list, partnerships not eligible under HMGP or HMGP post fire, but eligible as its own activity under BRIC and FMA. Codes and standards eligible all across the board except for FMA. And then innovative C and CB type projects. Unfortunately, FEMA doesn't really give an example what an innovative C and CB activity is, but it is eligible across all 4 grant programs. And then, like I said, now we're getting to the hazard mitigation projects. property acquisition, mitigation, reconstruction, elevation, stabilization, flood risk reduction, flood proofing, all eligible across all 4 grant programs. Where you go into safe room, not available under FMA, because FMA has its own requirement of being a NFIP insured structure, so that really doesn't apply to safe rooms. Wildfire mitigation, not eligible under FMA. Mitigation retrofit, that's all available across all the programs. Secondary power source and warning sirens or systems eligible under 3 programs, not eligible under FMA. And then aquifer storage and recovery, eligible across all programs. And then similar to innovative C and CB projects, they have innovative hazard mitigation projects under all 4 programs. They don't really say what is an innovative project. They just give you kind of a path forward. If you have a project that maybe doesn't fall directly into one of these categories, they have this innovative hazard mitigation project. All right. I just went through those 2 quick visuals. I just wanted to briefly touch on management costs because this is the 3rd type of hazard mitigation project. It's not construction and it's not non-construction activities. This is management cost that FEMA will allocate if requested to manage the grant, not the project, just the grant. So think about the time spent after you get awarded. Now you have to manage the grant itself. That could be, reviewing the grant agreement between the state and your local entity. Time doing that, time reviewing it with legal. Doing quarterly reporting, whether it be performance reporting, like on a project, like how is the project doing, or financials. So getting those information to FEMA. RFR processing, so requests for reimbursement, travel, and some indirect costs. So it just, a lot of people are not aware of it, and it is available. You can get up to 5% of your total project cost for staff time or for this project management type of activities. I'm sorry, grant management activities. Okay, so it's not tied to the project, like directly, like you're not, going out and doing site visits. That's not what I mean by that, because that's project management. I mean grants management, like these examples right here, managing the grant itself. All right, this is I believe my second to last slide, and I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm going over or not. So here's the HMA grant process. No matter where you are in your project development phase, you're going to fall somewhere on this wheel, whether you're still doing public outreach on who wants to participate in potentially an acquisition program or an elevation program or a retrofit program. You're scoping out the alternatives of all that. You're still working with the community. You really don't know what direction you want to go, and then it goes to the scoping part of it, and then it goes to when you submit the application, then your award, and you carry out the activities. So no matter where you are, you fall somewhere on this wheel. Either it be somewhere in the pre-application submittal side of the top right half, or the post-award submission. So that was a good graphic to show the group. My last slide is just, it all starts with an idea. If somebody has an idea, of how they could fix the flooding in a certain area, or how to thin the the forest next to a neighborhood or next to critical infrastructure. Maybe the trees are getting too close to power sources, power lines, and they just want to be kind of move that barrier back. It all starts with an idea. And then it all starts with expressing that idea to the right people and getting the right people to the right table. Like if you don't have an engineering background or if you don't have a floodplain management background, maybe you're not an engineer that knows the size of a generator that is needed to power a hospital. You grab these people together and to scope out what you want to do. So it starts with somebody's got to have an idea how to fix a problem. But if that's not communicated to the right people, it's hard to actually execute it and get that ball rolling, whether it be to apply for scoping to scope out that idea, or if you already have everything ready, you have maybe a certain amount of projects on the shelf and you just pull it off, dust it off, and you're ready to go for construction ready. It all starts with an idea. So like I said, to recap, I went over some eligible categories and activities. For regular projects, I kind of really hit on phase projects and then 5% projects. And for CNCB projects or activities, I really tried to hit a little bit harder on the project scoping because some people are not aware that that's even an activity type. I kind of went through the list of what's eligible versus disaster versus non-disaster, brief synopsis on management cost, and then the next step is like just conveying that idea, getting the right people to the right table too. I have some links here that will be provided. Hazard Mitigation Assistance Program and Policy Guide. That's the July 2024 guide. There's also tons of hazard mitigation assistance job aids. You can go to this link, and if you want a job aid for a generator project, you're going to get a lot. If you have a job aid for flood, fire, earthquake, they're going to have job aids for those project types that I just spoke about. They also have program support materials. And what I mean by that is they can provide you with, like, say, if you have a flood mitigation project, they'll provide you with a technical job aid that tells you what you need to look for, what questions they are looking for you to answer in your sub application. There could be EHP documents in there as well. Benefit cost analysis, construction projects only. So if you want more information, you click on that link. There's also a link for webinars that have previously been recorded by FEMA. I think one of the most useful ones is the last one. It's the mitigation action portfolio. It's where FEMA is taking a look at all mitigation projects that they've funded throughout the United States and territories, and they've compiled a list by disaster or event type, and they've listed out like the best ones, I would say. So 2 or 3 per project type. So 2 or 3 flood mitigation projects, and then they go into detail about the communities that applied for it. Sometimes there'll be a cost associated with it. I know for sure microgrids is in there. Some good examples for that, but it just compiles it into like kind of like a thought-provoking document for communities to look at and be like, hey, this community got funded by this program, and it's protecting these types of assets. That's almost the same as like what we're trying to do. You know what I mean? It kind of just gets those wheels turning. All right, so like I said earlier, myself, Aaron, and Chelsea, we're in contract with the state of Nevada to support application or sub-application development. Here's our contact information. We'd be happy. I know I'm kind of running close on time for questions, but Any questions that you guys have, we'd be happy to do a smaller session or a one-on-one session to kind of help you along the way and help you get to the next step in your mitigation process. So we're here to help. Here's our information. Like I said, this PowerPoint will be posted online. Hopefully, by the end of the week, if that's accurate, Hal. And
Yeah, that should be correct.
I just want to say thank you to Hal, everybody else on the call, especially for Janelle. I don't think she was able to make it on this call today, but appreciate you guys taking the time to spend an hour with me as I speak about mitigation projects. Was there anything in the chat?
I didn't see anything. Hold on, let me see. Just some thank yous, and that's all we have.
But I really appreciate you guys' time today. I know I stumbled a little bit early on because I had to clear my throat, but hopefully I said everything that made sense. And if you have any additional questions, you reach out to myself, Chelsea, Aaron, or anybody at the state in the hazard mitigation office.
Okay. Thank you, Matt, for your excellent presentation today. Thanks everybody for coming today and viewing the training. Once again, my name is Hal O'Brien. I'm the Hazard Mitigation Specialist for the Nevada Division of Emergency Management. And you can contact myself or Janelle, the State Hazard Mitigation Officer, Janelle Woodward, at our office here at the Hazard Mitigation section. Please feel free to contact us if you have any questions. And once again, I really appreciate Whit O'Brien team, Matt, for the presentation today. That will end our training for today. And everybody have a great day, and thank you.
Hey, thanks everybody.
Thank you very much.